Let me take my thing off of here then, if I'm going to be on camera.
We're looking at Kenneth W. Stone Sr., my father. And he is going to tell us about his childhood growing up. Dad, tell us about what it was like when you were a kid. Where did you grow up at?
We grew up there on the east side of Kansas City, 16th and Agnes. And it was area there that we were surrounded by white people. A block down on Bell Fountain was all white. On the east side of us was the American Sage Wood Company, and it was in that area, it was all white. On the west side of us, it was all black up till you get to, now we don't want to go into all of that though, but it takes a lot of that. Benton Boulevard, because then it was a certain area where black people lived was from where Truman Road is now, south to 27th Street, and east and west. It would be east, we would go over towards Jackson, and west would be to Truce. That was the pocket that the black people lived in that pocket. But we lived right near the next block of where white people lived, and it was a nice area. They had their swimming pool down there, a deluxe swimming pool where you could not get close to.
So they had a swimming pool down there, but you weren't allowed to swim in it?
We were not allowed to even walk in the park. It was a park down there with the swimming pool. And in order for us to go to a drugstore over there on Truman Road Prospect, we had to walk around 3, 4, 5 blocks to avoid crossing the swimming pool, because if you walked across that swimming pool, the racist guys would chunk rocks at you, call you bad names, get out of the park. So we knew not to cross in that park.
Wow. What year were you born, Dad?
1928, September 1928. And I was born in Old General Hospital number 2. That was the black hospital up there on Charlotte or Holmes up there. General Hospital number 2.
So you said black hospital. So
black hospital.
The hospitals were segregated.
Segregated, yes. We had one black hospital down there on 18th and Tracy, which they called, the name of it was, I'll have to ask Virginia now, I can't remember the name. But that was a black-owned hospital. Then it was another one at Linwood and Prospect, which was a Catholic hospital, St. Joseph, but it was segregated. It was.
What would happen if you went to the wrong hospital?
They would send you where you belong. They would send you to General number 2. That was the hospital. And they had a reputation of because it was the only hospital the blacks could go to. There was a wait program. You almost had to wait your turn before any doctor would see you.
How long would you have to wait sometimes?
maybe hours. They'd have you in the hallway waiting for some doctor to see you.
So, where did you go to school at, Dad?
I went to school at first went to school at Attic School. They're at 19th and Woodland. 19th and Woodland. My childhood was in Arkansas. My father and mother were deaf mutes. My father, George Stone Sr., his occupation back in those days was a porter or a janitor to make a living. And he had worked at some shoe store downtown, Buster. I think the name of the shoe was Buster Brown, Buster something. And they had sent him to Little Rock, Arkansas, and to work in their company from downtown Kansas City to Little Rock, Arkansas. He met my mother in, I don't know what part of it, not Kansas City, Kansas. It's a deaf school in Kansas, state of Kansas. I don't know where. I always intended to look that up. But he met my mother. She was as a child, she had spinal meningitis, and it caused her to have the death problem. She couldn't. She was, well, back in their days, we would call it deaf and dumb, but that is not the proper term. It's deaf mute. And he was, they married, and I was one of the 4 kids that was born. I was born in Kansas City, Missouri at Journal number 2. Joe was born in Kansas City, and Choo Choo, that was a nickname for our sister, was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. George was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. I determined that was because Papa George and my mother moved from Kansas City to Little Rock, back and forth, is the reason why Choo Choo was born in Little Rock. George was born in Little Rock. Joe and I was born in Kansas City at Journal number 2. And Bertha became sick in Little Rock with tuberculosis. So my Aunt Stell, that was Bertha's sister, had to go to Little Rock to bring her family back to Kansas City because she wasn't able to take care of the 4 kids. I must have been about 4 or 5 years old. I remember the room that my mother, I don't know why that image stayed with me. She was sitting in a rocking chair, and it must have been, she had the baby, it had to have been Choo Choo. She was nursing. And we had a coal oil lamp on the floor. No light, just a coal oil lamp.
You didn't have electricity then?
No electricity. No furniture in that room, and that stayed with me. That imprint, nothing. So as a child, we didn't have any happy memories. And then when Bertha got sick with tuberculosis, Stell brought us back to Kansas City, and Bertha, that had to be in 1930. It had to have been about 1930, 1935. No, maybe 1933. A lot of these things I had to try to determine myself. I was old enough to go to school. So I had to have been 5, and went to attic. They entered us in attic school. They're at 19th and Woodland, and Bertha. In the meantime, Bertha had passed after she was brought to Kansas City. So when they determined that she died from tuberculosis, and they quarantined the house, quarantined us, dropped us out of the attic school. I think at the time George and myself was going to attic school, and we were sent to W.W. Yates on 12th and Lydia. It was an open air school on the top floor where they kept sick kids, underprivileged kids, were kids that had different diseases, to keep them separate from the other kids. And so that's where I spent my childhood, in an elementary school from the 1st grade on up to the 7th grade, up there on the top floor of the open air school. Joe and I. Joe, they eventually moved him down to the bottom floors where the other students were, because he was better, but I was more on I had weight. I probably weighed 50 pounds. I was thin. I had malnutrition, so I stayed until because that floor they took care. The kids in open air school, they had breakfast every morning. They'd go to school. They'd have to take a shower. This was their program. Take a shower, they'd run you through the cold water, come out, and I felt different from the rest of the kids, because I couldn't be allowed around them, because you were exposed to tuberculosis and polio. Back in that day, they had people were scared of polio. There was several kids up there that had braces on their legs. They couldn't walk because of polio, and other types of disease. So they had classes from 1st grade to 7th grade.
So tell me, Dad, what was it like back then with segregation the way it was and not being allowed to go to different places? There were certain places you just could not go, right?
Oh, it was you adapted to that. You knew where you belonged and where you didn't have to. We stayed right in our vicinity. We knew the movies downtown you couldn't go to. I think one of those theaters you could go to, but they had a top floor that you had to go if you had to go to a movie downtown. But our movies were 18th and Lydia, Lincoln Show, and The Jim Show. The Jim Show was the first black movie in our neighborhood. And then they had a Carver Theater at 27th and it was probably 26th 26 and Prospect. Carver Theater, and then they had one at 12th and Paseo. Let's see, I can't think of the name of that. Huh? What'd she say?
Castle. Castle.
Castle, yeah.
Castle Theater.
Castle, uh-huh. So those were the black movies we had. The Gem Show was my top. We would go to the Gem Show every weekend to see cowboy movies, Three Stooges, and Bugs Bunny. Whenever they was on together, we would prepare ourselves for that weekend. So we knew where we belonged, and we stayed in our area. Because if you went outside of your area, you know you would get in trouble. Somebody would want to call you out of your name. But we had our own system right here at 18th Street, 18th and Vine. Businesses was booming. We had a nice area.
So tell me, what was it like as you grew up and got out of high school? You went into the military, right?
Right. Well, after we graduated from W.W. Yates School, that changed my life because I felt I could be with the regular kids. I went to R.T. Cole's Junior. That was a trade school for 1 year, and then from R.T. Cole's went to Lincoln High School. Went to Lincoln High School for my sophomore, junior, and senior year. Lincoln High School. That's where I began to develop into manhood, and became orientated on being a normal young man. And in 1946, I graduated from Lincoln High School at the age of 17, and that was in June of 1946. And that month, my homeboy, we called him Fats, we decided we was going to join the Army, because during that time they were recruiting, and they had the draft going, so we enlisted in the Army. June, right after, about 2 weeks after graduation, we enlisted in the Army. 1946, and the recruiter had promised that we could go to any theater of operation in the overseas if we enlisted. You could go to South Pacific, or what they call the ETO over in Europe. And we decided we wanted to go to Europe because the rumor was that they treated black soldiers better in Europe than South Pacific. But that was just a ploy. I wound up in South Pacific. And
so did you find that the military was segregated also?
the military was segregated. I went in a service at the time of when Truman was president. Truman was, after President Roosevelt passed, Truman took over as president, and it was under Truman that he desegregated the Army, the military, but still it took time for that to take place. But he was the one that, uh,
He integrated it, right?
integrated, yeah. Yeah, he integrated. We, when I went into service, we, everything, we were the black, we went overseas on a ship that was packed with black recruits. And that was a horrible experience
Why was that?
because it took us 7 days to get to, because we didn't nobody know where we were going, only to South Pacific. Then when the rumors went around that we was going to Hawaii, that's where we wound up, in Hawaii. But it took us 7 days on an army ship that ran out of water, that it was downstairs in the base of the ship where the mess hall was. I stayed on top deck all the time because it stunk down there of vomit. Some guys would get sick at the table and puke all across the table because the ship rocked.
And they wouldn't clean it up?
Oh, they would clean it up at their own pace. And just left an odor in that environment down there. And most of the soldiers, and I did too, stayed on deck with our army bags and made pallets up there to sleep on deck.
So you mean there were just all black soldiers, no white soldiers on the ship?
Oh, no, it was all black.
So it was all segregated. You went across on different ships.
Segregated, yeah. That was, once we got to Honolulu, that's where they docked there in Honolulu. And we got off the ship there, and it was about 3 weeks before they would even place us where we belonged. They had a place they called a holding place, and that was horrible. It was no facilities. We had to eat canned rations and drink bottled water. Well, let's see, did we have bottled water? Yeah. But we had our canteen where we had to put water pills in your water in the canteen so you wouldn't get any kind of disease. But after once they held us there for maybe several weeks until they put us in our different camps, and I went to camp to Schofield Barracks in Oahu, Hawaii. The Schofield Barracks, that's where the Japanese, when they bombed Pearl Harbor in 1941, they come through Honolulu, Schofield Barracks, old Oahu, bombed those ships, shot up Schofield Barracks. There was a movie made of that area. That was the name of that movie was Burt Lancaster was in that. It was well, I can't think of the name of that movie right quick. It'll come to me in a minute. But the Japanese airplanes flew over Schofield Barracks, bombing Pearl Harbor. And so that's where I wound up, at Schofield Barracks. And they had a all-white band there, and they disbanded that band was beginning to they disbanded the band, I believe, or most of the soldiers retired, and that's when they started the all-black band. And my MO was, I was in the band in high school, and first lieutenant in ROTC, and so that helped me get in the band. I was in the band and special service,
What did you play, Dad?
tenor, alto, saxophone. I played at it, but that whatever your MO was before when you went in the Army, that's they try to fit you in that
Oh, really?
position.
Hey, Dad, I remember you telling me a story about when you got out of the military and you were catching the bus back home. Tell me about that. You said you caught a bus back and you ran into some problems on the bus.
What? Now this was during when I entered the service. That was in 1946. In June of 1946, is the bus that carried me up to Salina, Kansas, to enter and to take the examination in the service. And the bus stopped at Seminole Town in Kansas, state of Kansas. I don't know which one, because the base we went to take the examination was the what was the name of that, Salina. It was Salina, Kansas. But anyway, we stopped at some little place in Kansas, and the bus driver, all the people got off the bus to stretch their legs and get coffee and stuff. And the bus driver advised me that I should stay on the bus. I was sitting next to the window because he knew that this little town in Kansas where we had stopped on the way to, the name of the base we were on the way to was Smoky Hill Air Base in Salina, Kansas. And a group of white thugs started jumping up, pounding on the window where I was sitting, hollering, "Get off the bus, get off the bus." And scared me to death, so I just remained right there where I was. I didn't move. And he had the door shut from the bus. And I was on the bus.
So they were after you.
Yeah. They were trying to get me off the bus so they could probably do whatever they wanted to do to me. So bus driver, people started coming back to their bus, and that's where we wound up in Smoky Hill Air Base. From Smoky Hill Air Base, I went from there to Pittsburgh, California. So that was a horrible experience. It was, they didn't even if you were in uniform, that's the way you were treated. And that was the mode back in that time.
Okay.